Welcome back to Burnout Meets Thriving. Today we're talking about flow. Let's start by naming something most people already know. If you've ever been in flow, you don't need a definition. Probably recognize it instantly.
Yeah, I feel that many people that I have known or even worked with can name exactly when they've either felt flow, and not many can actually say they truly felt flow at work.
Right. Like, honestly, it's not super surprising. Flow usually shows up in our downtime when we engage in hobbies. I'm talking about unpaid hobbies, or even in the endless scrolling that a lot of people get in.
Yeah, I think for me, I call these my beautiful mind moments, if you've seen the Russell Crowe movie. But essentially, it's a state of feeling fully immersed in whatever activity I'm engaged in. I have felt it when I used to practice music for hours, and more recently when creating some sort of content for my programs, I really get into it. And you enjoy it so much, or I feel that I'm enjoying it so much that I lose track of time. And most recently, I also felt it while crafting my vision board with my roommates. My college roommates, I think, Farra, you can relate to that one too. As an artist, right? Just being engrossed in an activity for hours on end. And you lose track of time, you're having a good time. Sometimes you even ignore your biosensors, right, when that's happening. But in this case, it's because your body is so focused on the activity that you're doing.
Yeah, and there's this like you said, this body level feeling to where you're like very immersed in the present moment, and in your mind and in your body, this is the only thing that matters, the activity that you're doing while in flow. Your brain is focused, but your body isn't tense. The effort just feels smooth, steady, and even calm rather than just forced.
Even just hearing about that and talking about it is already putting me in a flow state. So I hear that, if we compare that to the work most of us do in modern day life, it's actually hard to think that this can happen at work, right? Even when you want to focus, something inevitably breaks it.
I wonder what that could be. Is it the Slack messages that come up all the time? Maybe it's the endless emails or even the meaningless meetings that happen throughout the day. It could even be that one quick question that turns into a 30-minute circle of corporate jargon that you just cannot get out of. Or maybe just the awareness that someone might be watching can throw you out of a flow state.
So the bullpens, yeah? The open bullpens where you just think that someone's watching you. The emotional difference is huge, right? I think even as we talk about it and the previous episodes where we've talked about burnout and that psychological safety, and now talking about flow. Flow feels alive, it feels positive, and typical work usually feels managed, negative, controlled, overbearing.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. No. You got it. That is definitely the thing. Like, most people confuse flow with productivity. While you can be productive while in flow, they are not the same thing.
Yeah, not even close. Not even close. You can be productive and miserable.
Definitely.
Just as the overworked, unpaid intern who's constantly on their feet, fetching everything and anything for everyone in the sales department.
Yeah, so let's talk about how to identify flow state. We have a few markers. Number one, you're in a deeply focused state. Some might call it hyperfocus. There's time distortion. You just lose track of time. You just kind of melt into your activity. And there's also like a sense of competency that you know exactly what you're doing. And there's that like effort that actually gives you the energy back. So not only are you deeply focused and in it, you also feel rejuvenated from the activity. So when you're in flow, basically you just feel balanced.
And once we learn to recognize and name those markers, the contrast with the typical work environment gets pretty uncomfortable. It's one of those, once you see it, once you feel it, you can't unsee it. And it's really hard to go back, I think.
Definitely, because like the typical workplace is designed around constant interruption. Hey, do you have a sec for this? And like being visible, like, did you say hello to everyone in the office when you walked in? Like this urgency that everything is a priority, that's not real. Also, just like this sense of control that's in the workplace that I'm sure a lot of people who initially sign remote contracts might be or have been experiencing over the past year.
Mm-hmm. And as you say all those things, I'm feeling like the negative vibes. And it's just wild to get in tune with your body to the point where we talk about flow and it feels good. And then you're talking about control and I'm like, ooh, get it off. I meet people all the time who experience flow in hobbies, caregiving, and volunteering. But when I really think about it, it's very rarely at their jobs.
Yeah, and people assume that means something is wrong with them or that they hate the work that they do. When really it's the pattern is actually the environment that they're in that's making them feel this way. So let's be clear here. Flow requires very specific conditions.
Yeah, and modern workday places are designed to block almost every single one. For my sociology folks who read Michel Foucault, the panopticon idea where you're being watched from every angle to control your behavior, to the point where you then start to internalize that and control your behavior. Then that becomes the interruption for flow, which brings us to the real takeaway here. And that is that flow is real, it's accessible, and its absence at work is not an accident. Something that Farra and I say all the time here, it's all by design, right? All of this is purposely designed. So we're gonna consult the research into our next segment. And this is where I wanna slow things down and say, flow state isn't just a feeling. We're talking about what it feels like in our body here, but there's actual data that supports this. And there's well-researched psychological studies and phenomenon that has been studied for the last 20 years. So again, these concepts that we hear that seem to be new, but have actually been around for a very long time. You know, flow is an established state of being.
Yeah, like people have been talking about and studying this for many years, so many years, more than you probably realize. Like I even have like an old book that I got from a thrift store. I think it was published in maybe the 60s. And it's specifically on focus. I think the book is actually called Focus. So even back then, they were talking about flow as being like a type of focus state or an optimal state of focus, really. And as we know, the current research also explains what a lot of us already know in our bodies, you know, like what we already intuitively know to be true.
Yeah, gosh, I love it when we have data to back up our inner knowing, right? Like the data that supports what we are feeling in our bodies. So let's talk about that. Today we're referencing the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I do apologize if I messed up that name. He is a Hungarian psychologist.
I think you got it.
I mean, I tried my best. Who is considered the father of flow. He discovered this after studying the work of Carl Jung, what he calls the experience of flow. So to digest all the research for you, here are the takeaways. Work on flow shows that it happens when challenge and skill are balanced. So if something is too easy for you, you're very likely going to get bored. If it's too hard, you're probably going to get anxious or come down on yourself or maybe even give up. So right in the middle, that's where you want to be. That's where flow usually comes out. So the question that Mihaly wants to address is how to put more and more of this flow state into everyday life, into what he calls a flow channel. And he actually talks about how flow is one of the secrets to happiness.
I mean, neuroscience backs all of this up. Our brains work differently in flow. Like the patterns that light up on an MRI scan are different when we measure somebody that's in flow. We behave differently in flow, which is great, right? There's less self-monitoring. There's less second guessing about what you're doing. And it's honestly a more efficient use of energy because it's rejuvenating you. It's giving you energy back.
It's a self-monitoring for me. I feel like at work, we often have to self-monitor so that we're on our game, right? And that's really, all of this is the opposite of what we talked about in our burnout episodes, where the brain is stuck in threat detection. So that self-monitoring, that hypervigilance, that you're like always watching out for. This is a very different state.
Definitely. Like flow conditions are actually very clear. When we have clear goals about what we're doing, we're getting immediate feedback from the activity that we're doing. We're experiencing autonomy. Like you're doing what you need to do to finish the project or attain the goal. You're in a deeply focused state where like nothing else matters. Also, there's like psychological safety, of course, like we always talk about. You need that to fall into a flow state. And it also needs to be a meaningful challenge. There needs to be clear goals about it, right? Which a lot of roles these days don't have very clear goals, even listed in their job descriptions, as we discussed in a previous episode. So it makes sense why, people are having a hard time with this. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If you line those up next to each other, this is absolutely not how most workplaces operate.
Mm-hmm. Farra likes to call this role clarity. We've mentioned this before, and role clarity and things of this sort provide clear goals, right? So when you don't have that, clear goals get replaced with shifting priorities, moving targets, moving deadlines, moving urgent, projects. Your autonomy gets replaced with micromanagement. Focus gets destroyed by constant interruption. Safety gets replaced by fear-based performance culture, which we'll have an exciting episode in the future when we talk about performance culture and how fear-based it is. If you haven't felt it, it's going to be very eye-opening. And meaning gets replaced by metrics, KPIs, data, numbers, metrics, blah, blah, blah.
Oof, KPIs. Of course, this is all not random. It's by design. This is how the system was set up to be, to take you out of your flow and just have you be productive. So what's wild is that flow dramatically improves performance, right? It improves learning, which, since onboarding now is only 2 weeks, we would need
even
we would need
if you're
improvement.
Lucky you get 2 weeks, Farra, because I've worked at places where I got 0 onboarding.
Yikes. I've heard that before. I've absolutely heard that before. But also it improves the creativity, right? We're always talking about, at least in the tech space, they're always talking about innovation, etc. But the thing that almost all organizations care about is improving retention. And so if you have employees that are constantly falling into this flow state, they're enjoying themselves doing the work, they're going to stay in that role. So organizations, they know this. They've had the data for many years, but the problem is that flow requires trust. And we all know that trust means letting go of control, which organizations have a difficult time.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder, why doesn't this happen at work? If you're saying it's been known for years on end, almost, and it's really getting down to the control aspect, right? When those two conflict, right, organizations tend to choose control. Things that we can monitor, things that we can measure, things that I can control. So the takeaway here is simple, but very sharp. Workplaces don't prevent flow because they don't understand it. They prevent it because they prioritize control. The flow state isn't easily controlled, and it's not easily tied to metrics. So you can see how not having that kind of data to prove it, or not having that tangible aspect to be able to hold on to or control, really shakes up managers, leaders, and organizations that utilize control as their primary management approach.
Yeah. The thing is, they could measure if they wanted to. The whole thing is that they want control over the measurement. All right, let's move into our third segment where we're creating some conditions for flow. So at this point, I'm sure many of you are asking, okay, but what can I do about this lack of flow state in my work? And we'll answer that, but honestly, there's a lot.
And so here we're going to get into individual strategies, which is a lot of what we try to teach you here, right? There's a lot that you can do in your own embodiment and in your own practice, but a lot of these are protective and actually not curative, meaning they're not going to solve the problem, but it is going to hopefully help you out. So you can create pockets of flow by using time blocking. If you're not familiar, please look it up. Time blocking is a big, big life changer, and it, allows you to take control of your schedule before others, right? Before your boss or before other meetings take over. So you can create pockets of flow for yourself, and I highly encourage that you do. And that's when you want to defend your focus windows. Don't let them get scheduled over. I remember that I would have my blocks of time in my calendar, and often I would have supervisors and bosses who would want to schedule over them.
That's crazy.
Many a times had to reiterate that I need that to create. You want me to create some good work for you, I need more than an hour, more than 30 minutes to be able to deliver something. And so I defended those focus windows as much as I could. And part of that includes negotiating boundaries, right? And this is where down the line, I hope that you begin to develop as you listen to Farra and I and our work here, because this will help you develop those boundaries and negotiate those boundaries at your job. You have ability to have say on what's happening at your job. So it is a hard conversation, but you can do it. It's hard once you start it. Once you do it once, you can do it again, and it's really self-empowerment. And another thing that you can do is align tasks with your skill level when possible. That is where role clarity is going to be really important, and talking about projects and challenges and new things. So the more that you have awareness on what you're good at, what your strengths are, things that you enjoy doing, you can request for those kind of projects, or you can research those kinds of things, or you can try and involve more of that in your work. So a lot of that actually starts with self-awareness as well. And then you start layering it on into your work life. And most importantly, you can stop measuring your worth by responsiveness or productivity. That's a big one. That's a huge one. I want to underline that one, and I want to say it again. Stop measuring your worth by responsiveness or productivity. So we live in this culture where if you don't respond to your email right away, you might get in trouble. Since when and why? Right? Since when and why do you have to be on all the time, 24/7, and super responsive? And then if you're not, somebody calls you out for it. Or if you're not seen as productive. I want to really encourage you to fight that perspective, because it really is what ends up leading to burnout.
For sure. And I can tell you right now, when we started having mini PCs in our pockets all the time, it makes people feel like they can have access to you 24/7 just because it can pop up in your notifications, right? So I blame the tiny PCs in our pockets. But all those strategies that Miriam just listed are very, very helpful. But let's be real, none of this fixes a system that's actively disrupting you. And that's really the unfortunate hard truth of all of this. Like, these strategies are fragile. Like, they work despite the system and not because the system allows it. So, like, know yourself in these moments and know that, like, it's not you.
I hear that loud and clear. Because here at the organizational level, the changes are actually very clear, right? We're looking at outcome-based work instead of activity tracking, trust-based performance models, fewer priorities. So this is like the antithesis of what it would look like if we're focusing on flow and that kind of environment. Less outcome-based work, trust-based performance models instead of fear-based, punitive performance models. Fewer priorities, because that's the other one. When you're inundated with so many projects, it's hard to pick priorities. Not everything can be a priority, and not everything is urgent. So organizations and a lot of leaders and managers out there also need to learn how to discern priorities and better assign them to their teams.
Yeah, a lot of people could use more discernment in their lives. But, the psychological safety should be infrastructure to these organizations, and not just like a fun perk that you have. Like, you can talk to your manager, that's cool, but like, you should also be afraid of them. Like, that's not how it should be set up at all. But every one of those, instances that we've chatted about requires leaders to let go of the control, or even like their perceived control, or everybody's perception of them having control, because honestly, that's what it is. It's perception. And control is almost always rooted in fear, right? Like, the employers are fearful, the employees are fearful, but it's not productivity or effective at all, right? Like, let's be honest, these leaders are scared, which is why this can't rest on the individual shoulders, right? Like, this is definitely a systemic issue.
For sure, agreed. And that's why we teach you both things. What you can do on the personal level so that you can maintain your sanity, and that awareness so that you can recognize it in your organization. Flow isn't something that you hustle your way into. It requires collective boundaries, so your own and some of that in your organization, collective voice, and leadership accountability. And again, I'm going to bold and underline and exclamation this one, leadership accountability. And this is where a lot of the self-awareness will come in. I've had very interesting conversations with Farra where we talk about control. And I myself recognize that I have a level of control that dictates some of my work. And Farra, you've actually been super helpful in showing me that and having that awareness for myself, which is why we need colleagues like you and why this kind of work exists, because the more self-awareness with, those things that you do, the more that we can actually do something about it. And that's when like it shifts it to like, oh, I'm aware of that. And you've been kind enough that we can talk about it. And then what can we do about it? And so that's a growing thing that I want to show y'all is possible and leaders can do. And if there's no self-awareness, y'all, we need accountability.
We do. I would argue they go hand in hand. We need both. I'm sure at this point, some of our listeners are thinking, flow state is a luxury. I'll never have that. But, let's get this clear. Flow is not a luxury. We're all deserving of being able to exist in flow state. It's a baseline condition for healthy human work and actual healthy human living, honestly.
And so here we're nearing the end of today's episode, and we're going to close with a call to action. So if you take nothing else away from this episode, take this. Flow is real, and the conditions for it can be created. And nothing is wrong with you if you don't experience it at work. Work conditions are a choice, and they are made by design.
So here's our invitation to everyone this week. Think about the last time you experienced flow state. Maybe it was while you were cooking your favorite meal or baking. That's for me. Or maybe you were on a short walk in the neighborhood. Maybe it was even just walking down the stairs in your building. Name the conditions that made it possible. Every single one, the mental ones, the physical ones, the behavioral ones. And then honestly ask yourself, do those conditions exist in your job? Right? I'm going to say that again. Honestly. Ask yourself, do these conditions exist in your job? I know sometimes that's difficult. So I wanted to reiterate. I wanted to reiterate that. Be honest. And that's like Miriam was talking about, the self-awareness. Being honest with yourself will help heighten your self-awareness. As we wrap up this episode, I want y'all to make sure to follow and chat with us on our socials. Burnout Meets Thriving on LinkedIn, Insta, and YouTube.
And really, real talk, we'd love to hear what comes up for you. Have you experienced flow? Is this a new concept for you? Did you know it existed? And if you'd want to experience it, what do you think you need to do to experience flow? So share it, talk about it, normalize the conversation.
Make it real, make it present. Also, if you're looking for assistance in your burnout journey, you can find my Burnout Reversal Kit workbook on Etsy at Burnout SS or on my website at burnoutsupportsociety.com. And if you're really serious about making a sustainable change, you can book a free 15-minute burnout consulting intake call with me. All right, so in our next episode, we're diving right on into the dark triad of leadership and why it just keeps popping up in that demographic. And we're also going to talk about the same systems that block the flow reward because of these harmful leaders.
I'm looking forward to that one, especially because I study and specialize in leadership. So with that, I also want to share thrivinghuman.life. I'm a coaching consultant for organizational leadership, new leaders, baby leaders, aspiring leaders, or anyone who wants to develop that self-awareness. Kind of what I talked about earlier with Farra, where having a colleague, having a person who you can actually dialogue with without the fear of repercussions or punitive action, it allows you to have a good mirror. And I appreciate you for that, Farra. And that's something that I can provide in my Thriving Human coaching and consulting. So if you're interested, do reach out, thrivinghuman.life, and you can also do a 15-minute, 20-minute consult, however it takes, to do our vibe check if this is something that you're interested in. Because none of this exists alone in isolation. I know that a lot of times we do feel alone. I must be going crazy. Like, is anybody else experiencing this? No. The workplace has changed. It is very different now. And you're not designed to be drained, depleted, extracted. That is very capitalistic work performance. You are designed to thrive and exist in harmony with our environments. And that's what we're promoting. So stay tuned.
So remember, your mind body is not the problem. The system is.